Hey Changemakers, it's Julia Chow. Welcome back to my channel. Did you know that October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month? I decided to take a little break on my usual content and focus on this subject because as women, this applies to all of us no matter what part of the world we live in. You know that we talk about capitalism, patriarchy, and racism here all the time. So actually, maybe this topic isn't so far off from our usual content, but we're going to focus a lot on domestic violence and the power hierarchies in a domestic or home situation with your family, with your husband, with your siblings. A lot of the conversation today is going to center around heterosexual relationships. That doesn't mean that domestic violence only happens in heterosexual relationships. Of course, it happens in same-sex relationships, marriages. It can happen between different family members as well, like parents, siblings, etc. A few days ago on TikTok and Instagram, I shared a story of a friend of mine who was 19 years old when she met a guy at a club who was in his 30s. He started pursuing her. She fell for it because she came from a background where she wasn't getting a lot of attention growing up. And this man, within only a few days of knowing her, coerced her to have sex with him. She was a virgin at the time. She wasn't ready, and he made her have unprotected sex. She ended up getting pregnant and having a baby. When I met this friend, the baby was already 3 years old, and the couple had already been married and living together. Getting an abortion was not an option at all because both of them were Catholic. Of course, the man wanted to have the baby because he was in his 30s and he was ready. She wasn't because she was determined to get her post-secondary education and she was only 19 years old. Or actually, I believe she was maybe 18 years old and the baby came when she was 19 years old. I know I have a lot of young followers on my channel and also a lot of women who are interested in dating, and maybe some of you have had these bad experiences where a man would try to push you or abuse you and take advantage of you in many different forms. It can be financial, physical. I talked about it on my content that it does not need to involve physical violence to be abused. I believe covert abuse is the hardest area to fully grasp because it is so subtle, and a lot of it has to do with very subtle power games, a lot of invisible manipulation and power plays that happen, as well as controlling the environment and gaslighting the person for a significantly long period of time. Of course, the time period can be 1 month, 2 months, it doesn't matter, but it is done over time rather than whereas physical abuse can be something that happens in a moment of time. Covert abuse is more so subtle and accumulative. I specifically want to use this time on this channel to talk about covert abuse because I believe most people understand physical abuse. Not that it makes it easier to leave the situation and help yourself, but I believe that physical abuse is understood by a lot of different people. Even when you go to different domestic violence help centers, they will usually immediately understand physical violence and will offer help. But there are a lot of people who suffer from covert abuse, non-physically violent abuse in many different forms that it usually goes unchecked for, in many cases, decades. Many people can live their whole lifetime without even having the idea that they're being abused. So I talked about that story on social media, focusing on my friend and how this developed and focusing a lot on age difference. And age difference is often a factor, but we want to also look at other areas of CPR. There can be financial abuse or financial power imbalance, or of course we're mostly talking about heterosexual relationships, but not only. Just because we have a lot of women watching my channel, so I focus there, it doesn't mean that if you're not in a heterosexual relationship, that's not your orientation or that's not your gender. I'm not saying that you can't experience that. But definitely male privilege, specifically cis straight male privilege over women, that's a huge power imbalance. And I don't think a lot of women understand to what degree the power imbalance is, because it's not just physical, it's also societal, it's cultural, it's familiar. How much our whole environment believes men, gives them power, especially cis straight men. We'll give them the benefit of the doubt, we'll forgive them, we'll tolerate them for such a long period of time, even when the victim, not always, but usually women and children are suffering, they're being harmed but the system, the court, they usually don't take it seriously. And if you've ever had to deal with the family court system, you understand what I'm talking about. That a man, a father, can do so much, and even then the mother is not able to claim sole custody until he does something extremely bad, like substances or severe physical abuse. But covert abuse usually is not enough to claim violence in an official way, and that's what is very frustrating. So what I want to do this October, using this month, the awareness month, as a way to open up the conversation to talk specifically about covert abuse. And instead of looking at red flags and signs and driving yourself crazy with hypervigilance, I want you to think about abuse, as we always talk about, from the perspective of power and power imbalance. If someone makes a lot more money than you, has more asset than you, that person has power. If that person has a better network or knows a lot of people who are influential, that person already has a lot of advantage over you. And of course, age is one thing, and that falls under the patriarchy category of CPR. Not only male privilege, but also age. Naturally, when somebody is older, they're going to have a lot more experience. They're going to have the upper hand because they're just going to have had the time to build up a lot more awareness. Pair that with somebody who is really aware of how business works, because our society is transactional due to capitalism being the main power hierarchy that rule humanity. That person understands power a lot better than you, then you pretty much don't have a chance against this person. So the best thing you can do is to not fall into the trap of trying to fix this relationship, trying to make it better, and overstaying your sanity and your wellness. When we look at the race category of CPR and the power imbalance, people may think immediately that white people have the upper hand, but it's not that simple because it's intersectional. CPR is intersectional. We have to look at all different aspects of power imbalance. So when I refer to my friend's situation, who was 19, her dusty, crusty ass husband at the time was 30-something years old. She was a white woman and he was a man of color. And based on her upbringing, I could definitely see why she would be uncomfortable with white men, because her father was a very, very overtly violent person. So it made sense that she would naturally look for somebody who wasn't really like her father. And your mind, when it thinks reductively because of underdevelopment, immaturity, just foundationally primitive, she thought that this man of color was going to be safer than a white man who would definitely abuse his white male cis straight privilege. But this is not as simple. And so I want you to understand how this man of color was much older, had a lot more life awareness, also a lot of anger towards the racism that he experienced in his lifetime, coming from a very, very racist, colorism filled country, a hate-filled culture. So he took out all his anger on my friend who is a white woman. Somehow it was all her fault, the mother wound that he suffered, because he had a mother who was helpless in the very patriarchal, traditional dynamic. He had a father who didn't care, he was neglectful, he left the family. He suffered a lot from racism all his life. He was never ever good enough. And now he had a white woman under his thumb. One that he took away her virginity, got her pregnant immediately. That wasn't enough to fulfill the misogyny. It fueled it even more. A lot of times male privilege can triumph race privilege. So if I have any white women watching this video, just dating a man of color, please, is not the answer. He can sometimes abuse you way worse than a white man, and a privileged white man at that. The best way to protect yourself is, first of all, to know your rights and have healthy expectations of how you should be treated in a relationship. I mentioned in the other videos how my friend's first encounter with this man when she was a virgin was coerced to have sex without a condom, any protection. That was rape. And how she was constantly coerced in her marriage to have sex, and she didn't want to because now she had a very negative association with sex that was punishment for her. all of those scenarios as well are marital rape. So this woman, my friend, was being abused and raped all the time, but we did not have the awareness that this was abuse. This was back in the 2000s, and we just didn't have a lot of education like this. We didn't have any opportunity to learn in detail what domestic violence is about. We didn't have social media to circulate this kind of information and videos. We didn't have older women around us who could teach us, because most of the older women that we dealt with and were around us were equally operating from an oppressed, prey, good girl mindset. They were getting ruined all the time by men, yet they kept trying to find the right guy. This is what we saw growing up and what we continue to have around us. The first thing you need to understand is what is abuse and what isn't, and that requires you to understand knowing your rights and also having boundaries. Now, boundaries isn't only about what you allow and don't allow for yourself, it's also how you exert yourself to other people. If you exert bad boundaries to other people and have those unhealthy expectations, it's really impossible for you to have good boundaries. The reason why I'm mentioning this right now is because a lot of you will think, well, I just have to protect myself. I just have to think about my boundaries. And then you have a really hard time understanding, okay, but is this good boundary or is this bad boundary? Should I allow this or should I allow that? There's a lot of confusion. That's why you want to think about from the perspective of if I do this to somebody, is this a breach, and would I be okay with receiving it? So if you start to think about it from a two-way perspective, is this okay for me? Is it okay for them? That's one way. But importantly, that's not enough a lot of times, because you could just have unhealthy standards. So you need to have someone who can teach you what's healthy and what's not healthy based on the situations that you experience. A lot of times, because all of us women are raised in the good girl mindset, raised in patriarchy, we don't know how to value ourselves. We don't know how to value other women. So we think that a lot of these behaviors are normal, even though now when I'm telling you about marital rape, you understand, you already know what that is. But oftentimes it is very difficult to acknowledge it when it's happening to you in that moment. That is the hardest part. You can read about it, you can hear about it and know exactly what that is. But what you may have a really hard time, and oftentimes it is the case with many of these covert abuse and physical abuse situations, is that we have a hard time knowing when it's happening to us and whether this is okay. Because oftentimes it's done from the perpetrator's perspective, through smiles, through admiration, all of this sugarcoating that comes with it. So if you see the sugarcoating and you're hearing the sugarcoated words, but you're feeling breached and you're disconnected from your body, you may not recognize right away that this is a boundary breach. This is the part that all of us women need awareness, detailed awareness, and help on developing, having the expectation, knowing what's healthy. Because a lot of times I've talked to women before who understand they're against domestic violence, they believe in feminism, they want to be empowered, or they think they're empowered. They'll find themselves in these really compromising situations, and I've been there myself as well, and that's why I am very passionate about this topic. If you can't keep your boundary in your personal life, you can't keep your boundary in your business, in your career, because how we do one thing is how we do everything. So if you find yourself engulfed in a situation because you're hearing nice words, or somebody's giving you positive gesture, or somebody is acting caring or pretending to care, but you feel like, okay, I've never really had somebody explain it like this before, or this person seems genuine or sounds genuine, because you were expecting hostility from someone who's going to harm you. You have to start paying more attention to people who use the sweet, sugary packaging to get their way. And my friend's situation with her rape was exactly that. She wouldn't have done it and she would have called the police if he had been violent towards her or forceful in the typical way that we imagine. Instead, He made it like, I'm so attracted to you, I admire you, you're a goddess. These are all the words that he used, and her heart was saying no, her body was saying no. She's like, I don't want to do it like this, this feels wrong. But she gave in, because then the self-doubt starts to come in. Oh, maybe you're wrong. Maybe the feeling that you feel where you think that what he's doing wrong or this is not right for you is actually wrong. Why would you want to turn away someone who admires you? Didn't you always want to be put on a pedestal? Like, all of these thoughts start to come, and that's how we end up in these compromising situations as women. I know all of you can relate to this. I know all of you women have gone through this at some point in your lives. And I would say nowadays it happens even sooner. For me, for my generation, at least in my group of friends who are very studious, and we didn't really think about boys until we became full adults. It started happening immediately when we went out into the world. And I know now in the younger generation, because all of this is happening sooner, girls are not even ready to even think about who am I and what do I feel. And then they're being bombarded with this push against and the confusion around what are my rights, what are my standards, not even the moment to think about those things. We didn't have the education, but we could delay the exposure for some of us. These girls that like a lot of Gen Zs right now, they don't even have time to develop, nor have the time to think about their standards, but all of it is happening so early when they haven't even had enough experiences with friendships or anything really, because it happens earlier on in middle school, sometimes in elementary school, and definitely by high school. Domestic violence issues are not going to go away as long as women are still just seen as subhuman resources who are less than men. It's just not going to stop happening. As long as there's capitalism, patriarchy, and racism, domestic violence is not going to go away. As long as capitalism continues to be the way it is, exploiting, seeing humans as non-humans, but just numbers and resources to fund the greater production and efficiency of capitalism, to make the top few percent the richest of the rich, and everyone else can scrap by and be a slave to the system. Domestic violence is never going to go away, because power abuse and imbalance is not going to go away. Now, in this system, those people who have certain power, let's say they have white privilege or male privilege or some kind of privilege, like class privilege, money privilege, they all know what their privileges are, and they will use those privileges as leverage to have more power and control in relationships. The covert way is to break you down from your emotional, spiritual level, to disconnect you from all your relationships and friendships. And then when you're isolated and you don't have really anybody else except for this person, then you are going to fall for it. And it happens almost as if it's voluntarily happening, but it's not voluntary. It's all carefully curated, coerced. You are coerced into it. This is why big age difference, status difference, class difference, financial power difference are not good idea when it comes to going into a relationship. You need to learn to stand on your own so that you don't get bulldozed by someone else wanting to take control and own you, your life, your body, using you as a resource. Even if nobody is hitting you or throwing you down the stairs, you have to know that if you feel controlled and abused, then you have the right to leave. Do it carefully, do it quietly, get help. My high recommendation is that if you find yourself in this kind of situation, you have the right to remain silent and get help from parties that are neutral, who are outside of your current circle, because usually the social circles around you will try to keep you in that relationship, either because they don't understand that you are being abused, but more likely because they're benefiting from the position that you're in. Domestic abuse is power abuse, is narcissism. Is somebody using their superiority against you. to extract everything that you are for their benefit. All of this content is designed to help you build emotional intelligence, intelligence in humanity, in our understanding our society, understanding how people operate. Being able to read cues comes from that. Being able to read signs comes from that. Rather than focusing on specifics, you have to look at all of it intersectionally, all different areas of CPR. So many of you want to be dating, want to meet the right person. But if you're a woman dating a man, you have to understand that patriarchy is what's getting in the way of you finding a man who is not going to abuse you, treat you badly, but seeing you as an equal human being and building a life together. This seems like a basic desire and request, but most of you women are not going to find it. This is just the reality that we live in, because women have been oppressed and abused for thousands of years, and only now we have something called financial power that's giving us the leverage to not have to be in these relationships. Women who don't have financial power have no choice but to be in a relationship with a man, no matter how he treats her. If you look at your mother, your aunts, and the women who came before you, like your grandmothers, whoever you know in your family, they didn't have a choice. It's not that it was easier to find a romantic relationship, romantic partner back then. They didn't have a choice that you do. Their standards are nowhere near what your standards are. They weren't going into marriages wanting equal treatment. They were going into marriages because they had to, because they were a commodity. So if you are wanting to date now and you have this expectation of finding this man, how are you going to find a man in this world? They were all raised in patriarchy. They were told that they were better than women. The signs were always there. They were actually told that all their lives. They've seen that, they've experienced that, because they've done things and they get away with it. They've done things to women, or they've done things around women, and they know that women can't get away with this. They've been in situations where the women take all the heat for a problem and the man gets away completely fine. And they've watched their parents have these interactions where their mother was constantly shitted on, or she was being abused, and the father always had an advantage and he could do no wrong. Oftentimes he will call the shots in a lot of households. Or you could have a quiet father who's covertly abusing your mother, but all you see is that your father is the quiet one, your mother is the reactive one, and she's reacting from trauma and anxiety, and she's having CPTSD episodes every single day. And because the way she shows up and the way she treats you, you assume that she's the bad one. And it's very, very common in marriage dynamics. The marriage that you want, the kids that you want, that's like your dream. A lot of women have this is like more important to them than their career, but you get there. But because of patriarchy, your dream shatters, your dream breaks down, because those kids are also getting brainwashed from the get-go. From the moment that they're born, they're your baby girl, your baby boy, but they grew up seeing you as less than, you as someone who can't be trusted, you as someone with less control or less power, or downright looking down on you, demeaning you. And so the first thing you want to do also, in the light of Domestic Violence Awareness Month, is how much you have devalued your mom unconsciously, because the evidence that you saw, your understanding of your childhood, is that your mom is the problem. Always, almost always, she's been the victim, especially if there was an income imbalance. You tell yourself that dad was a good provider, but the income imbalance already puts her in that vulnerability. And then second of all, if that is the case, then how do you expect to read signs that when you go out into the world and you're dating? Now, some of you might think, oh no, I already know my dad is the problem. But again, you want to look at it not from the perspective of, is this a narcissist? Is that a narcissist? Is that person going to abuse me? You want to look at it from the human condition level, where men have been told that they are just better. They're stronger. They have more advantage. The law system also supports them more. If you want to walk into kids, first of all, I'm going to give you my honest opinion because I get asked this question a ton of times. I don't recommend kids to women in this environment. I don't. I have children. I don't know if I had done it if I had all of this awareness. If I were to give a blanket answer, yes or no, I would say no, because it puts you at a lot of risk. When you don't have a lot of awareness around what covert abuse looks like, feels like, and you know, like I can't really be fully trusted with making good decisions with people, then that's coming from a place of unawareness and a lot of levels that you haven't really healed a lot of your wounds, relational wounds from your childhood. So if that is the case, you are going to walk into something, and then that kid, it's not fair for the kid. It's not fair for you because this is something you desire so much, but it's also not fair for the kid because the kid is going to become the glue that holds you and that man together. Even when you get divorced, that kid is going to be used as a pawn to abuse you. When somebody wants that much power and control over you because they feel entitled, they don't care. And this is not, oh, because this person's narcissist, but that person isn't. No, this is having privilege, period. When you have power and privilege, you can do it, so you do it. And a lot of people, because they can, they do it. There's a lot of men. It's not because they were born with some kind of personality deformity, like a lot of people make it. There are people who are absolutely, like, they have a condition, but a lot of the marriages that we're talking about and parenting with a man, you have to understand that he just has a huge advantage, and when he does, he sees it, he knows it. So if you're struggling to find the right partner and you keep doing it over and over again, you go to some love coach and they don't give you a hack. This is why I'm so against these love coaches. They make women walk into domestic violence situations with power imbalance, with lack of awareness, without truly understanding what it means for a man to have male privilege. It's not a small privilege. It's not a few things. It's a huge thing. It's a huge advantage. A huge advantage because our system runs to protect the man owning the woman and the children as his property. That's where the law came from. So, I don't recommend, if you don't have kids, I don't recommend it, okay? I do recommend that you build your capitalistic leverages. I do recommend that you become ultra successful in your career. So if you wish to have a child, then you are protected. You basically just need a sperm donor. And believe me, raising kids, even just with a sperm donor, is not going to be easy for you as a single mother. You have to be prepared for all of this. You need to be realistic rather than being sold by the fantasy of how wonderful it would be to have these beautiful children. Capitalism does not support love and connection. Capitalism is anti-love and connection. Capitalism is the reason why we have domestic violence with such prevalence, why women can't find simply a man who will see her as an equal partner. You supporting a man who is less than is a sure way to get into a domestic violence situation because he will exert that male privilege like there's no tomorrow. The more vulnerable a man is, or the less accomplishment he has, the more chip on the shoulder he has. And if he has race privilege or financial privilege, doesn't matter. Even if he doesn't have financial privilege, if he has race privilege, or if he has just plainly male privilege, he will exert that power and he will get you to submit and do his bidding, and your whole life will be fighting for the foundation of safety, peace. Forget love and connection. You're going to be fighting for basic emotional needs. When you improve yourself, every time when you're building your career, you actually become a lot more aware. You're forced to mature and learn all these areas, how to assess people, how to read character as they are, not who you wish them to be. That's what a successful career requires you to become, a leader. Focus there, even if you have children, because that's going to create the layers of protection for you. I normally ask you to go down to the description box and find the link to book a call with my team to work with me. But this time, that's not what I'm going to ask you to do. I just ask you to share this video with a couple of people who you know needs to hear this message. Thanks for watching. Own your power.